My name is Jess, and I've always been good with numbers. It's what I do. I'm a risk analyst for a big finance firm, which is a fancy way of saying I spend my days staring at spreadsheets, calculating probabilities, and trying to predict the unpredictable. I find comfort in the logic. You can chart a market fluctuation, you can model a corporate default. There's a pattern, a reason, even in chaos. My whole professional life is built on a simple premise. With enough data, you can manage any risk. You can stay in control. My office is on the 89th floor of the Tower of the Century. It's mostly glass, and on clear days, I can see the entire city sprawled out below me like a circuit board. It's a view that's supposed to make you feel powerful, I guess. Most days, it just makes me feel far away from everything that actually matters. My desk is neat, my files are color-coded, and at 5:15 p.m. every single day, I start packing up my bag. Because the most important calculation I make is the one that gets me on the 5:47 p.m. train home to my kids, Ryan and Christy. That's my real job. Managing their chaos, from scraped knees to homework meltdowns, is the only kind of unpredictability I've ever truly loved. My goal, every single day, is just to make it back home to them. It's funny. For someone who gets paid to worry, my deepest fears have nothing to do with money. I'm not scared of market crashes or economic collapse. My real fear, the one that lives in the quiet, dark corners of my mind, has always been about randomness. The sheer dumb luck of tragedy that no spreadsheet can predict. It's the fear of being on the wrong flight. The terror of my last moments not being filled with thoughts of a life well lived, but with the screech of twisting metal and the agonizing, helpless knowledge that I'm never going to see my children's faces again. I run the numbers in my head sometimes, a morbid little habit. The odds of a catastrophic plane failure are minuscule, something like 1 in 11 million, but they aren't zero. And that's the part that terrifies me. The fear isn't of dying itself. It's a failing. It's the thought that my last breath would be a gasp of regret, knowing Ryan and Christy would have to grow up with a mother-shaped hole in their lives that I could never, ever fill. My only motivation, the only thing that has ever truly driven me, is them. Getting back to them is the entire point. I never knew that this quiet, everyday fear was just a rehearsal, a practice run for the real thing. I never imagined I'd have to face that primal terror right here in my safe, orderly office, 89 stories above the ground. The day it happened was a Tuesday. It was offensively normal. I had dropped the kids at school, Ryan complaining about a history test, Christy proudly showing me a drawing of a 6-legged dog, and arrived at my desk by 8:30 a.m. I was on my third cup of coffee, staring at a projection model for a new tech fund, trying to decide if the numbers were optimistic or just plain delusional. Outside my window, the sky was a crisp, perfect blue, the kind of day that makes you feel guilty for being inside. I remember making a mental note to take Ryan and Christy to the park after school, maybe even get ice cream. It was 9:02 a.m. The first sign was a shudder, a low, deep tremor that seemed to vibrate up through the soles of my shoes. It was so faint, I almost dismissed it. This tower is a city block wide and over 400 meters tall, It sways in the wind. But this felt different. It wasn't a sway. It was a jolt, sharp and vertical, like a giant had kicked the building's foundation. My coffee sloshed, leaving a brown ring on a stack of pristine reports. Across the aisle, my colleague Mark looked up from his screen, a question in his eyes. We shared a look, a silent, "Did you feel that?" before a shared, unspoken shrug of dismissal. Buildings make noises. We went back to work. 2 minutes later, it happened again, but this time it was no tremor. It was a deep, guttural thump that felt less like a sound and more like a pressure change that punched the air from my lungs. The entire 89th floor lurched violently to the side. Not a sway, but a vicious, sickening snap, like a bone breaking. The lights flickered, buzzed with an electrical snarl, and died, plunging the office into a surreal twilight, lit only by the morning sun and the glow of 100 computer monitors. This time, there was no denying it. A woman screamed somewhere down the hall. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my first thought, the analyst's thought, was a detached, stupidly clinical one. Structural failure, sublevel, most likely a gas explosion or primary support column compromise. And then, immediately, the second thought, the mother's thought, slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. Ryan. Christy. Chaos erupted. People were shouting, scrambling from their desks, a sudden panicked herd in a glass-walled pasture. My own legs felt like they were filled with concrete, but I forced myself to move, control the situation, manage the risk. That's what I do. I joined a small panic group moving toward the central emergency stairwell, my voice surprisingly steady as I told people to stay calm, to walk, not run. But as we reached the fire door, a wave of heat washed over us, so intense it felt like opening an oven. The heavy metal of the door was already warping, the red paint blistering and peeling away like sunburnt skin. A thick, oily black smoke was pouring from the seams around the frame, smelling of burning plastic and something else, something acrid and chemical. It wasn't an escape route, it was a furnace. Panic turned to pure terror. The rational part of my brain was screaming that there were other exits, other stairwells at the building's four corners. But the primal fear was already taking over. We were cut off. I ran, leading a few others toward the service elevators at the core of the building, my mind racing through the floor plans I'd memorized during countless boring fire drills. Deny it. Find another way. This can be managed. But the elevator buttons were dark, dead. The call panel was cold to the touch. Nothing. We were shouting now, a babble of panicked voices echoing in the now dark corridor. And that's when I saw it. I looked up at the decorative ceiling panel above the elevators and I saw a hairline crack that wasn't there before. As I watched, mesmerized in horror, the crack widened with a faint grinding sound. A fine powder of dust and pulverized drywall rained down on my hair. The building groaned around us, a long, agonizing sound like a dying beast. The floor beneath my feet tilted, just a few degrees, but enough to send a rolling chair careening down the hall and smashing into a wall. The point of no return wasn't a choice I made. It was a physical shift in the world beneath me. I was standing on a platform that was coming apart, 89 stories in the air. The monster wasn't coming for us. We were already inside it. The smoke was a living thing. It wasn't just in the air anymore. It was a predator, thick and greasy, hunting us through the corridors, stealing the light and the oxygen. people were on the floor coughing, their bodies racked with spasms. Mark, my colleague, was trying to smash a window with the fire extinguisher, but the reinforced glass just shuddered, a spider web of cracks appearing without giving way. Every calculation, every risk assessment model I had ever built was useless here. There was only one certainty. If we stayed on the 89th floor, we would die. And my last thought would be of Ryan and Christy, my failure. That one thought cut through the chaos with the clarity of a diamond. The fear I had harbored in the dark of night wasn't an abstract terror anymore. It was a physical presence wrapping itself around my throat. I would not let my children's last memory of their mother be a picture on a news report. I would not die a statistic. I looked at the window Mark had sailed to break. The cracks had weakened it. Beyond the glass, the world was still there. The perfect blue sky, the distant, unbothered clouds. It was an obscene contrast to the hell we were in. The street, a dizzying 400 meters below, was a map of a world I no longer belonged to. But it was the only way down. The analyst in my brain screamed. Terminal velocity, wind shear, structural integrity, 0. It was a suicide note written in the language of physics, but the mother, the desperate, primal animal that had taken over, saw something else. She saw the building's decorative exterior lattices, a grid of steel beams and ledges just outside the glass. A ladder. A horrifying, insane, impossible ladder that was 89 stories tall. It was a 1 in a billion chance, but 1 was not 0. 0 was staying here. Help me, I rasped, my voice raw. I grabbed a heavy desktop computer, the monitor still glowing with meaningless stock tickers. Together, Mark and I swung it like a battering ram into the fractured window. On the third swing, the world exploded outward in a cascade of glass and a roar of wind that momentarily cleared the smoke. The city's noise, a distant symphony of sirens, rushed in. For a moment, we just all stared into the abyss. Then I moved. Before logic could reassert itself, I was climbing through the jagged frame. The wind tore at my clothes, a physical force trying to rip me from my perch. My hands, already bleeding, found a purchase on a cold steel beam. I didn't look back. My world had shrunk to the single terrifying task. My whole body was screaming, but my mind was chanting a mantra. Ryan, Christy, Ryan, Christy. My descent was a journey through hell, one floor at a time. My sensible office shoes, so practical for my commute, had no grip. I kicked them off, feeling the rough cold steal through my thin stockings. Every handhold was a prayer, every foothold a miracle. The 87th floor greeted me with a blast of heat. A window below me blew out, and a dragon's breath of orange and black fire roared into the sky, so close I could feel my skin blister. I screamed, a raw animal sound lost in the wind. I had to move sideways, my fingers screaming as I shimmied along a narrow ledge, the fire licking at my back. The smell of my own burning hair filled my nostrils. I don't know how many floors I passed in that state of pure terror. Debris rained down from above, shards of glass, chunks of concrete. A piece of falling metal struck my shoulder, and the impact nearly tore me from the building. My grip held, but my arm went numb, a dead weight I had to drag with me. My hands were raw meat. At some point, the rational part of my mind returned, not with comfort, but with a new horror. It started counting. 64s to go. 55. Each number was a judgment, a reminder of the sheer impossibility. I saw glimpses of the horror inside as I passed.
faces pressed against windows, mouths open in silent screams before they were swallowed by smoke. I was fading. The pain was a constant, deafening noise. I found a small ledge on what might have been the 40th floor and collapsed onto it. I was going to die here, a failure. I closed my eyes and I saw them. Ryan at his last soccer game, his face flushed with pride. Christy asleep in my arms, her small hand curled around my finger. It wasn't a memory, it was a lifeline. It was a fire in my veins that burned hotter than the one consuming the building. It was the only thing that mattered.
I don't know how I got moving again. I think I simply fell. A controlled, scraping slide down a vertical beam, my mangled hands and burned skin breaking my descent. And then a new sound cut through the chaos. A shout. It wasn't from above. It was from below. Through the smoke, through the tears and the blood, I saw them. Firefighters. They were on the floor below me. Maybe the 35th. They had broken through a window from the inside and were staring up at me, their faces a mixture of disbelief and horror. A pair of strong hands reached out, beckoning me. That last drop was the hardest. My body had nothing left. It was pure will, fueled by the image of my children's faces. My fingers slipped. My feet found no purchase, and for one heart-stopping second, I was falling. The city rushed up to meet me, but they caught me. Strong arms wrapped around my broken body, pulling me from the open sky and into the smoky, debris-strewn wreckage of an office. The floor was solid beneath me. I wasn't falling anymore. The last thing I remember before the blackness took me was the face of a firefighter. His eyes wide with awe, the soot on his cheeks making him look like a ghost. "My God," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Where did you come from?" I tried to answer. I tried to tell him about my risk analysis, about my commute, about the park, about ice cream for Ryan and Christy. But all that came out was a broken, desperate whisper. A single word. That was the beginning and the end of my entire world. Home.
The horrors linger. Thank you so much for watching or listening. By liking and subscribing, you're helping me summon the next chilling tale from the shadows. Join our community of the brave and prepare for what's to